Good day, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Deploying PHP Apps on the Cloud. My name is Roy Sarkar, and I will be your host for today. This is the fifth in a series of webinars developed by our PHP experts to bring you the knowledge, tips, and tools necessary to build apps ready for the enterprise. First, a few housekeeping items. All attendees are muted for the duration of the webinar. If you have a question, you can use the question tool on the right side of your screen, and we'll answer them throughout the broadcast or at the end of the session. Also note that today's presentation is being recorded and will be available online following the webcast. We will also provide the slides on SlideShare. Now I'd like to introduce Boaz Ziniman and Dima Zbarski. Boaz is the Senior Director of Cloud Strategy at Roguewave Software, leading all cloud integration and partnerships with major cloud providers, and has more than 15 years experience with web operations, development, cloud architecture, and building business relationships. Boaz also has the distinction of being a Zend certified engineer since 2005. Dima is a cloud integration engineer at Roguewave Software, helping make Zend Server available on Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, and IBM Bluemix. He has over 10 years experience as a systems and Linux administrator and has performed research on compression algorithms. Now I will hand it over to Boaz.
Okay, so thank you very much, Roy, and thank you very much for joining our webinar. My name is Boaz Ziniman, and as Roy mentioned, I will host this webinar together with Dima Zbarski, who will drive the second and the more hands-on part of the webinar. Our agenda for today includes an introduction to code deployment, a review of some methods to deploy your PHP code, and many demos of the different deployment methods. We will keep some time at the end for Q&A, and if you have any questions during the session, please type them into the question panel in the webinar management. So before we dive into specific examples, let's try to define what is deployment and what is a deployment process. So the basic definition, software deployment is all the activities that make a software system available for use. It includes different steps and systems, and usually, but not limited, includes operating system level configuration, like setting up your NFS mounts, installing and patching software and other operating system level operations, setting and defining your web server. It can be Apache or Nginx or anything else, and dealing with its configuration. Then we go into the PHP installation part and configuration, including PHP extension, INI setups, and more. And one of the main parts, and one of the parts that we are going to focus a lot during the presentation today, is your code. And it's usually repeated over and over again when delivering your code when you have a new version. And we should take into account that in many cases, in most cases we are going to show in this webinar today, we're talking about multiple servers in the cluster mode, especially when talking about cloud deployments. So there are many scenarios when you need to repeat it to more than one machine, or have some kind of mechanism that takes care about this multi-machine deployment for you. Last but definitely not least, anything related to creating and upgrading databases, schema, and dealing with database data, obviously a very important part of deployment. So in most cases, your new version won't have any changes to the database, but there are definitely some scenarios when you need to perform some database updates, if it's for schema or to the data itself. Now, after talking about what is included in the deployment process, how can we define a good one? So we are trying to get a process that has many characteristics from the list as possible. Usually you won't have all of them, but this is relatively a long list. So a good deployment process should be simple to execute and preferably fast. Sometimes you don't have a choice. You have many complex steps which might take some time, but in general you want it simple and fast. We are trying to build a process which is consistent and repeatable with no unexpected results. We want to be able to do the process over and over again without being surprised by the outcome. Automation gets a lot of points, and the more we automate, the more we reduce the human error factor, which is 2 bullets down. If we are able to automate our entire process, or at least large parts of it, it opens the door to start building systems with continuous delivery models. And if it's continuous integration or continuous delivery, it will be impossible to get to this level without automation, and this is a very important part of being able to do a good deployment process. Continuous delivery and continuous deployment is out of the scope of this webinar, but definitely a very big and important topic that if you want to automate your process, you need to take care of. Before we move on to talk about specific methods to deploy your PHP code in the cloud, I would like to get back to Roy for a short poll.
Great, thanks, Boaz. So as usual during our webinars, we run polls to both get an idea of where our audience is coming from, but also to give you an idea of what your peers are thinking. So our first poll is which of the following cloud providers do you use? Amazon Web Services, GCP, Microsoft Azure, DigitalOcean, or none of the above, or do not use a cloud provider. And I'll take this time, I'll give about 30 seconds for people to answer, and take the time to cite some recent study by Forbes magazine, where they'd estimated for cloud and cloud markets for 2016, and found that worldwide spending on public cloud services will double from 70 billion in 2015 to over 141 billion in 2019. So that's significant growth in the industry. And they also predicted revenue to be around 127 billion by 2018. So significant opportunities for everyone for sure. And then they also found, interestingly enough, that 50% of new applications developed as a platform as a service will be IoT-centric, which is quite a shift from more traditional uses for the cloud. So it looks like most people have voted, so we'll share the results. And it looks like we have a pretty good spread, but the majority is Amazon Web Services, which is great to hear, given that that's what we're talking about in today's session. But also, actually, DigitalOcean has slightly more than Amazon Web Services, so that's an interesting result and something that Boaz specifically asked for. Any comments on that, Boaz or Dima?
So actually, I asked to add DigitalOcean to this poll, and I think now we get a very good explanation why. I know it's really, really popular for development and really popular in the PHP community, so I was wondering what would be the percentage compared to the others, and definitely interesting results.
That's good. So I'll hand it back to you.
Okay, so now let's go and talk specifically about PHP application deployment options. Now, this is the main reason we are all here, but I want to start in saying that when you're talking about application deployment specifically, or in general when choosing a tool to do something in your system, you need to choose the right one for you. So there are a lot of different methods for deploying code and deploying PHP code, and some of them are very simple, some of them are very complex, but it's very important for you to choose the method that serves you well, and I'm going to talk about some of the options here. So when looking at which option we have, I'm going to deploy a PHP application to the cloud. As you can see, there are several alternatives. The first one, and the most simple one, is doing manual deployment. It's really not recommended, but many of us are still doing it. And the idea is to take files from your development or staging environment and copy them to your production servers. You can improve manual deployment and overcome some issues with it that Dima will discuss in a few minutes by deploying your code from Git or from S3. All manual deployments usually take care only about the code portion of the deployment process, and there are many steps you will need to do manually. So you need to take this into account, and we're going to show some of these methods in a few minutes. Taking a snapshot is not a real deployment method on its own, but after you finish a deployment and have a fully working machine, one of your options is to keep a copy of this machine as an image, which is called in the Amazon terminology AMI, Amazon Machine Image, for future use. It can be deployed to additional machines to your cluster, or in case of a disaster, you can use it as a snapshot to roll up new machines. And this method known also as the frozen pizza method, because you're basically freezing a machine and taking it out of the freezer into the oven each time you need to use one. So definitely, if you're looking for a simple solution to replicate a machine that you already deployed your code to, taking a snapshot can definitely help you with that. Using shared file systems such as NFS or EFS, which is AWS implementation of NFS as a service, allows you to deploy your code to a single location and share it between members of the cluster without the need to copy it from server to server. Obviously saves some time and can reduce the number of errors that might happen because you need to repeat a copy process manually. Beanstalk is AWS platform as a service that makes deployment super easy, and we are going to demo it in a few minutes as well. I will let Dima show you how easy it is, and trust me, it's really, really easy. And if you can overcome some of the limitations of Beanstalk, and especially limitations for PHP, this is something that can really make your life easier in terms of both deploying and managing your entire environment. And last, then, server deployment. It allows you to fully automate the process using various Zend tools that can take care of every aspect of a good deployment process. Now I would like to switch to Dima to talk a bit more in details about the different methods and do some cool live demos. So Dima, you're on.
Hi everyone, my name is Dima, and I'm going to overview with you a number of deployment options for PHP applications. First one is manual deployment, and manual deployment is about copying web application files manually to one or more servers depending on your setup. In general, you copy files over network using, for example, rsync or SSH protocols to production servers, unpack them, and if needed, set up permissions, run Composer, etc., etc. Everything by hand. Today, best practice is to use Composer to manage dependencies. It allows minimizing size of web application and automates installation of dependencies on servers, and you can use it to simplify part of deployment. Alternative to copy of files using SSH, we can use Git repository. In this scenario, we set up local Git repository that can be easily updated using git pull command. We can even go one step further in this scenario and automate Git update after each commit using Git hooks. Another alternative would be to use an S3 bucket, and in this case we can automate update of files using simple notification service notification on S3 bucket change. So let's see a small demo of manual deployments. I'm going to use a demo application, which is a real-world application we developed internally. So this is the application. This is how it looks like. This application was developed by me for internal use. We use it to generate CloudFormation templates to automate spinning of Zend server cluster on AWS. So I'm going to take Zend Studio and I'm going to add another paragraph of text on main page. I will style it with color red and emphasize it using bold text, manual deployment, so it will stand out. So I'm going to save it, and now I'm going to export my application as zip file. After that, I'm going to copy the zip file to both to two nodes of our manual cluster, and then I will have to connect using SSH and unpack both zip files and see the updated version of application. So I copy the file to first node, I copy the file to second node, and while the files are being copied, I will open SSH connections. Okay, so let's go back to Studio and see that file copy finished. Now I'm going to unzip file and then copy unzipped files to document root. Now I updated first node of the cluster, and second node is still not updated. So now I have a problem of mixed versions of web application in my cluster. When someone tries to reach for now this web application, there is a 50% chance he will get outdated version. So we will talk in later demos about how this can be fixed. So I'm going to unzip on the second node and copy files to document root. Okay, so now I'm going to open my browser and see the result. As you can see, manual deployment in red, deployment finished. Okay, to avoid the problem of mixed versions, I could, for example, take one of nodes out of cluster and upgrade single node, then upgrade second node and bring it back to the load balancer. Or, for example, I could spin up two new nodes and do the upgrades on them, and then replace both nodes on the load balancer and delete old instance. So now let's go to the second cluster, which is very, very similar to first one, except that it has Git repository on them. I will show you one of nodes of the cluster, just to show you that it has Git repository. As you can see, it's a Git repository, and now to update the code of these two nodes, all I have to do is just do a git commit. So I will change the text to Git deployment, save the file, commit it, and push to GitHub. Now, on the GitHub, there are two webhooks, one for each server in cluster, which calls a PHP script, which in turn calls git pull command and composer update. So now I just pushed the commit, and here is the commit. It already automatically got updated and deployed. This technique solves the problem of bringing files to the cluster, but doesn't solve other problems. For example, like what I do with database, or what I do with the inconsistency of versions across cluster nodes, because there is still some very, very short time when one server got updated and another one didn't finish running the webhook. So back to the presentation. Let's summarize the pros. Pros of manual deployment is that it is very easy to start with, and it's probably most customizable deployment. You can control each step of deployment, check how it is executed, and even make adjustments during the deployment process if needed. Cons of manual deployment are that since it's manual, it's very error-prone to human mistakes. It's very easy to forget something, make a typo, or even do things twice. Additionally, when deploying PHP application manually to cluster of instances, there is an inconsistency of application versions. Autoscaling is not always possible with this type of deployment, and of course, manual deployment is not continuous integration or continuous delivery friendly. So let's move on to shared file system deployment with the EFS. Shared file system deployment is not actually is actually another case of manual deployment, but it deserves separate discussion because it simplifies many aspects of deployment. EFS stands for Elastic File System, and it's a network file system from AWS, accessible using NFS version 4.1 protocol. Instead of copying files to all servers, you copy files to EFS. Since EFS is only accessible from EC2 instances, we can copy files to any instance, and all REST instances will immediately see new files. So let's see how EFS deployment works. I have another cluster, EFS, which still has the original version of our web application. Now I'm going to Zend Studio, and I'm going to add EFS deployment paragraph text. Now I export my web application as zip file, but I will copy it only to one machine. And on that machine, I will unpack it to the EFS instead of document root. So I will export the zip, take the zip file and copy to EFS webinar demo first node. Now I will open this SSH to EFS1. Unzip the file and copy file from the zip file, this time to EFS. Now you can actually, I will show you that actually the document root here is empty because document root points directly to EFS. Okay, so now I'm going back to the EFS, update, refresh the page and see the EFS deployment. Now the point of EFS is that there are no copies of files on each node. Instead, every node gets files from the EFS over network. So once we update files on EFS, files updated on all servers. So there is no inconsistency between versions in cluster because there is only one copy of files in our system. So let's get back to the presentation and summarize the pros and cons of this deployment. The pros of this deployment method include easier distribution of files in multi-instance environment and single source for web application code and data files, which prevents mix of versions on different nodes in cluster. Most important con is that EFS is a single point of failure. Also, EFS is running in multiple availability zones on AWS, it cannot cross region boundary. Therefore, if you want EFS in multiple regions, you will have to synchronize two file systems. Other cons include tricky performance tuning, inability to access EFS outside of VPC, and lack of file locking. Our next deployment option is AWS Beanstalk. Beanstalk is not exactly a deployment mechanism, but rather a platform as a service solution from AWS that supports deployment of many types of applications, including but not limited to PHP. Unlike previous deployments we have seen, Beanstalk allows us to focus on development and can be fully automated. In terms of Beanstalk, you create applications, and each application can have one or more environments running it. This allows you to create one environment in production, another for staging, and even more environments for testing and development as needed. Beanstalk accepts either an S3 bucket or a zip file as source of application. Every time you upload zip file to Beanstalk, new version of application is saved and deployed. allowing you to roll back to any previous version of application anytime. With Beanstalk, you just upload code, and Beanstalk takes care of AWS resources management like EC2 instances, auto-scaling, load balancer, and even RDS instance to store database for your application. Beanstalk supports Composer and will even run Composer to install dependencies automatically if your application has Composer JSON file in its root directory. Beanstalk is very customizable and allows you to modify both PHP and Apache configuration. Last thing I will mention about Beanstalk is that it can deploy Docker containers instead of PHP applications. So if you have Docker container with your PHP application, this option might be most interesting for you. So let's see how deployment of application on Beanstalk looks like. I will get back to Zend Studio, change the paragraph text to Beanstalk update, Beanstalk deployment, sorry. Now, I will export my files, export as a zip file, and that zip file I will upload to Beanstalk. So I will close this tab, and this is our original web application. I will refresh the page even so you will see it. It's still the original application. That's how the AWS Beanstalk console looks like. I have a webinar demo Beanstalk application here defined, and I have a single environment here for this application. So I will open the environment, and I have here an upload and deploy option. So I will take my zip file. Now I have to give it give new version label. Let's give it a version 2 label, for example, and deploy it. Now it will take a few seconds till the deployment is over. Now we won't wait till the deployment is done. We will overview first pros and cons, and I will when get back to show you the deployed application. So pros of this deployment is that it is much more powerful and manages most of AWS resources for you. It is also relatively easy to set up, and its support of Docker containers can be worth to check too. Cons of this deployment method is that customizations are harder to implement. It's not as simple as .ini file editing manual deployment. And of course, Beanstalk is only available on AWS, and it can be a sort of vendor lock-in. Also, major cloud providers have alternatives to Beanstalk like Azure Websites and Google Apps. Let's get back to the Beanstalk console. You can see that we have a running version 2 that I uploaded. And now, if we refresh the page, we see our new paragraph, Beanstalk deployment.
Can you do the rollback?
Rollback. Okay, let's do some rollback. I will go to the application versions, select the initial, and deploy the initial version again. Now, as you can see, the new version doesn't get deleted, and I can even spin up a new environment and deploy the version 2 in another environment to test it. Okay, let's get back to the presentation. We have one last method to review, and it's Zend Deployment. Zend Deployment was developed by Zend as part of Zend Server PHP application server. It allows packaging and deployment of both libraries and applications. It allows specifying requirements of PHP extensions and libraries. Upon deployment of application, all dependencies are validated, and in case any of dependencies is missing, application deployment will fail. Same as when updating application. In case new version requirements are missing, new version won't be deployed and old version will be left intact. Zend Deployment makes deployment of application on cluster an easy task. Whenever you deploy applications, Zend server makes sure that it is deployed on all servers in cluster, and when new server is added to cluster, it will automatically have all applications and libraries deployed on it. Since Zend server allows to manage PHP settings and Apache virtual hosts too, these are also kept in sync on all servers in the cluster. Another feature of Zend Deployment is that it allows rollback of applications. If you decide that new version of application is not good enough and want to roll back to previous version, you can do it in a few clicks in user interface. Zend Deployment also features powerful set of customizable hook scripts that are run at different stages of deployment. This allows proper configuration of application during deployment and cleanup on application removal if needed, of course. Application can also expose customizable parameters for deployment. For example, you can create application with database server details as parameters. This will allow you to deploy same application in different environments by changing parameters. Let's see Zend Deployment in action. This time we will deploy different applications. It's Boaz WordPress demo application. Boaz built it to show how EFS can be used to share WordPress uploads. I already created Zend server cluster and its nodes has EFS with WordPress uploads attached. One of hook scripts links EFS folder to WordPress. RDS with WordPress is already in place and WP config was adjusted accordingly. If we were creating real-world application, we could make hook script generate WP config PHP based on deployment parameters. But we want to simplify things, so we don't add it as a parameter. So I'm opening WordPress cluster application. I'm opening a deployment XML which describes the application deployment for Zend deployment mechanism. And I'm going to export this application as ZPK first of all. Here it's creating the ZPK. I could actually use Zend Studio to directly deploy ZPK on the Zend server without leaving Zend Studio, but I want to show you the UI of Zend server, so I will do the deployment itself by hand. So I will close the Beanstalk. That's the Zend cluster. It now has no application on it, and it shows Apache to Ubuntu default page. I will go to the UI, log in first of all, and then I'm going to open applications, manage applications, and here I'm going to deploy application I just created. Okay, while it uploads, let me remind you that since we're talking about Zend server here, Zend server can manage both virtual hosts and PHP settings, all INI settings for PHP and its extensions. And if you change some setting of directive or add some virtual host, the change is propagated to all nodes in the cluster. So I can deploy my application, for example, on default virtual host, or I can create a different virtual host it doesn't matter because all virtual hosts will be created on all nodes of our cluster. Okay, so application upload finished. I have a small README here from Boaz. We have an application details which includes the name of application as it will be displayed. I can choose a virtual host. I only have the default one, and I can choose a subpath to deploy the application. I could enter here, for example, blog to deploy to the blog, but I want to deploy it to the root, so I will leave it empty. The application prerequisites are validated, and since our deployment XML specifies only PHP version that must be at least 5.3, we don't have any problems here. So we will continue. Here I have two parameters. Since Boaz created his demo for different clouds out there, I will choose production AWS, and I will turn on EFS support, which makes post-deployment hook to link EFS folder to the WordPress uploads folder. I can review settings and deploy the application. Now deployment, in this case, it's very, very fast because the zip file is already in the cluster, and you can see it was deployed. We will refresh the page, and we see the web application of Boaz blog. Back to the presentation. Let's summarize the pros and cons of Zend deployment. Zend deployment is very customizable, allows defining requirements for applications, features a set of customizable hook scripts for different stages of deployment process, and can be parameterized to further customize deployment. Zend Server AMI, which is available on AWS Marketplace, allows specifying deployment files in user data when instances started, in which case these files will be automatically deployed on Zend Server. Cons of Zend deployment are that it is supported only by Zend Server. It requires knowledge to use it, and sometimes it can be complex to implement. This is the end of my demos. Thanks everyone. Back to you, Roy.
Thank you, Dima. That's a great summary of the different deployment methods and the pros and cons. We will now go to our second poll. And actually, before that poll, I'd like to encourage everyone who has a question on cloud deployment, either something that Dima and Boaz had talked about today, or even any questions in general, to please use the question pane in your webinar control panel. So our second poll is, what do you think is the biggest barrier to cloud deployment for organizations? Is it cost, a lack of security or privacy, a loss of control over systems, or a lack of knowledge or skills? And we'll give everyone about 15 seconds to answer. And to provide some context to how your peers are thinking, I found a recent survey by RightScale that asked similar questions, and in that survey of over 1,000 IT professionals, they found that security is not the top cloud challenge, at least compared to the previous year. Rather, it's a lack of resources and expertise. That same survey also found that cost management is a significant challenge, but it's also an opportunity for savings based on their feedback through smart workload optimization and selecting lower cost cloud or region alternatives. So we'll take a look at the results of this one, and it looks like cost is considered one of the biggest barriers, as well as the lack of knowledge or skills. So that's actually not surprising. We see the same thing with our customers as well. Boaz, Dima, do you have any comments on that?
So there is one very common knowledge in the IT industry that lack of cloud knowledge is one of the biggest issues companies have right now, and the ability to train and recruit people with the right knowledge to help them with their cloud project. So I'm really not surprised by the default option being so high. Cost, obviously, it's always an issue because many companies, many organizations invested in infrastructure for over the years, and now moving somewhere else and paying ongoing cost for cloud resources is an issue. Usually my recommendation in general is to start moving small and not trying to boil the ocean by moving everything in one go. So if you have a new project, or if you have a project that can benefit from being hosted in the cloud, if it's some cloud services that you might need, or amount of traffic data that you can't handle in your regular setup, you might want to consider moving small projects, isolated projects at the beginning that can mitigate both the cost and the lack of knowledge, because you don't need to move the entire system, critical systems and stuff like that.
Excellent, thanks, Boaz. So now I think it's time to go to our Q&A, as that's the last slide, I believe.
Yep.
So we do have a number of questions, and we'll try to get through them all from the audience. And please, if anyone has any other questions, just use the questions pane to answer them. So the first question that we got is regarding Zend Deployment. So in the Zend Deployment, whether the database for WordPress site was already created, or was it included in the ZPK file? So I guess the question is the database, was the database already included or created, or was it included in the ZPK?
No, the database was created separately, and it wasn't part of ZPK. But I can tell you that storing the schema, at least schema of database in the ZPK is not a problem at all. You can store the SQL file, and then you can use, for example, PHP hook script to run the schema on target server.
You can do it with the data as well. You can put the data in a zip file and unzip it into the database and just import it as part of your deployment.
Sure.
Okay, great. The second question that we had is, I think it's more of a general question, and I'll read it verbatim. Using Subversion, it is possible to submit only changed files, and by running a post-submit script on the Subversion server, then run an update on server source code like a test server. Why not also review that method?
So I think it's very similar to what we showed with Git. Basically, there are a lot of differences between Git and Subversion, but in essence, they are both code management tools with ability to run commands in hooks and other methods. So, Dima, unless you have anything to add, I think it's more or less the same scenario, just using different tools.
Exactly. Subversion has hooks itself, and you could either set up a Subversion client with the checkout of Subversion and then update whenever you need, or it doesn't differ a lot from a Git repository scenario. It's almost the same.
Okay, thanks. The next question is also regarding Zend Deployment, and the question is, does Zend Deployment also support other cloud services?
First of all, Zend Server is available today on Azure and AWS.
And Google.
On Google, we have only a developer edition available for now.
And Docker image.
And we have, of course, a Docker image.
That you can basically deploy on all clouds out there today, including IBM, Google, Azure, and AWS.
Yeah, we have a Cloud Foundry image too, but that's not supported today, not managed.
So basically, every environment that has Zend Server can fully support Zend Server deployment. So no matter where you're running, if it's on AWS, Azure, Google, and running Zend Server, you can use the methods of Zend Server deployment we showed here. And if you're running on-premise or even on your own laptop, it's exactly the same process. It has nothing to do with the fact it's running on one system or another.
I will add that only Zend Server on AWS, on Marketplace, the EMIs has added value of supporting user data, parsing it, and allowing to specify some additional options. No other cloud has this kind of support from our side.
Great, thank you. We're just running towards the end of our time, but I'll just get to a couple more questions. The next one is, what is the cost of a cloud server with Zend?
Okay, so the cost is really changing by the size of the machine you're running. We have several cost models. One of them is for the developer edition, which is a flat rate. It will cost you 3 cents an hour no matter the size of the machine you're running. And if you're going to professional or enterprise edition, the price goes from 2 cents an hour and up to $1 something, I don't remember right now, but it really depends on the size of your machine. And the more powerful your machine, the more you're going to pay. But it's a good opportunity to talk about pay-as-you-go model. And in our case of Zend Server on the cloud, you're basically paying only for what you use. So you don't need to commit in advance for the number of servers you're going to run, and you don't need to buy the license in advance. And if you have peaks that you need to spin up additional servers, you're going to pay only for those additional servers and only for the time you're going to need them for the peak. So having these options of running Zend Server in the cloud makes it really, really flexible, and in most cases cheaper than putting Zend Server on premise and buying a license and using it with your deployment.
Okay, and the last question that we have time for is, does Zend Deployment integrate with Git or other version management systems?
Okay, so you could use, for example, you could store your deployment XML and those scripts in Git, and then you can, for example, use Git hooks to automate the creation of the Zend deployment package and deployment of it on, for example, staging environment or production environment or development environment, whatever you need.
I think it's important to add that Zend deployment is fully based on files. So all the definitions and all the settings and all the scripts are stored in files, so there is no issue to store those files in Git or any other code management tools. And the other thing is that everything we showed with Zend deployment and everything we are doing with Zend Server in general is based on APIs. So you can do everything we showed here using Zend Studio or using Zend Server UI from an API interface that can be fully automated, can be integrated into continuous delivery processes, and combined with any other tools that are able to basically do an API call to initiate a process on the side of Zend Server.
Excellent. Thanks, Boaz and Dima. Since it's been a pretty full webinar and we're at our time limit here, we'll just wrap up. For questions that we didn't get to, and there were a few, we'll post a blog shortly to provide answers and to send a link. So thank you, Boaz and Dima, and thanks to our audience for attending. As a follow-up, we'll send out a few resources for you to take the next steps towards accelerating your PHP development. As a special thanks for attending today's webinar, we will also send a personal code for a $100 credit towards Amazon Web Services, which you can use as you wish. This concludes our Enterprise PHP webinar series overall, and I encourage everyone to visit our website to rewatch all 5 sessions and visit our blog to learn more about PHP debugging, performance, scalability, and cloud deployments like we learned today. As well, all attendees should have received a discount code for our PHP security course, so please check your emails. You can also check out Zend Server, Z-Ray, and our cloud deployment options at zend.com. There, you can also try out Zend Server for free with no obligation. Thank you, everyone, for attending.